Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're here. I still see a lot of people are coming in, but in the sake of time, we want to make sure that we get to hearing all of you tonight and share some great information with you. So we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Holly Wingard, and it is a pleasure to welcome you. I am going to hide my camera, but I wanted you to see who I am, but want to just do a couple of little housekeeping things with all of you before my colleagues get us started on sharing some great information with you tonight. So in order for all of us to be able to participate well together, I am going to be your moderator today of this town hall with the support of my colleagues, Jennifer Roundtree and Alicia Guevara Warren from the Early Childhood Investment Corporation. And right now, all of you are on mute due to the large number of participants. We're expecting about close to 500 people today. So we are going to keep everyone on mute until we open it up for questions and comments. And we would like to really encourage you to utilize the question box. And so with GoToWebinar, the way to do that is you should see in the right-hand corner of your screen an orange arrow. And if you click on that and open it up, there is a navigation bar. And you should see the word questions in there. And if you just click on the little arrow next to questions and open it, then what you can do is easily type in questions, and our team will be able to read your questions and comments. So any comments and questions that you'd like to be sharing, please feel free to put in there. And then also we will be providing opportunities for some people to be able to speak tonight. And if you are interested in speaking and sharing your thoughts verbally, we will invite you to raise your hand, and then I will kind of go through the list and call on people and unmute you. In order to raise your hand, again, in that navigation bar on the right, in attendees, you'll see your microphone and your screen and camera, and you should see a little hand. And if you just click on that hand, that will unmute you. Or, I'm sorry, raise your hand and show me that you would like to speak, and I can call on you. So we really want to make sure that we hear from you. So we really encourage you to type in things as we go and ask questions. In addition, we do know that we have limited time and a lot of people that will have a lot of things to share and a lot of questions. We will do our best to get to all of those, but please know that we are going to compile all of the questions that you pose and a synopsis of what is collected from what you type in there. And we will send it out to everyone who has registered in order to ensure that we answer everything completely. So don't worry if we finish up and we haven't answered every one of your questions. We will get to that and send those out to you. So we're going to get started. We're curious about who is with us today. And so this evening, we'd like to just start with a quick poll. And I am going to launch this poll. We're curious about who's with us. So if you are a child care provider, we are hoping most of you are child care providers, either center-based or a group or home or license exempt provider. Let us know that. If you are joining us as a legislator or legislative staff, please let us know that. And then those who really identify as an advocate, supporter, or community organizer, if you could let us know that too. Great, see lots of responses coming in. Just going to give it one more minute. We're getting close to having everyone having told us who you are. Okay. Couple more seconds and I'm going to close it up. Thank you to those of you who are adding these in. Okay. So it looks like we've got 44% of you that are center-based childcare providers and 41% that are group home and license exempt providers. Wonderful, thank you. A nice mix of both of those. A couple legislative staff and advocates, and then a few that really identify as others. So thank you so much for letting us know that. And I am going to pass it off to my colleague, Gilda Jacobs, who is the CEO of the Michigan League for Public Policy, who is going to kick us off this evening.
Great, thank you, Holly. I want to wish all of you a good evening and thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be part of this event. Tonight's conversation is a critical part of building a Michigan where kids and families can thrive. And all of you have an important role to play as decisions are made about the future of childcare in our state. As Holly said, I'm Gilda Jacobs, President and CEO of the Michigan League for Public Policy. And since 1912, the League has worked to solve problems facing Michigan's families. And here we are 100 years later, continuing to fight for economic and social justice, and in particular for kids and their families. I want to take a moment before we begin to recognize our listening panel, Michelle Richards and Lisa Brewer-Walraven. Can you please introduce yourselves? Michelle?
Thank you so much, Gilda. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Richard. I serve as Governor Whitmer's Early Childhood Advisor. My job every single day is to make the best policy we can at a state level to support you and families. So I have a notebook ready for the conversation today and just really appreciate all that you're doing. Happy Week of the Young Child, and thanks for spending an evening with us.
And Lisa?
Hi everyone, Lisa Brewer-Walraven. I'm the Director of the Child Development and Care Program at the Department of Education in the Office of Great Start. Just like Michelle said, very happy to be here with you all this evening to hear all of your ideas as we look forward to continuing to reimagine childcare in Michigan.
Thank you. We are so fortunate that both of you could be here with us this evening. I would also like to recognize several legislators in our audience, including Representative Greg Van Workum, Representative Kelly Breen, and Representative Jack O'Malley. As a former lawmaker myself, I know how critical it is to hear directly from your constituents and stakeholders when it comes to important policy issues, and tonight's subject is indeed critical. Despite the hard work of parents, caregivers, and advocates around the state, the data show that we have a lot more work to do if we're going to make Michigan a top state to have and raise a child. That's why Think Babies Michigan was formed. Our collaborative is made up of the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, Hope Starts Here Detroit, Michigan's Children, the Michigan Council for Maternal and Child Health, the Michigan League for Public Policy, and over 1,000 parents, advocates, and caregivers, and that grows every day. In order to improve outcomes for kids and families in Michigan, Think Babies Michigan has a plan to increase enrollment in childcare, home visiting, early intervention, and postpartum care for families with low incomes. And in order to be successful in that effort, we also need to make sure new policies dismantle the structural inequalities that hold kids back. As a collaborative, we have developed several strategies that will help Michiganders. When it comes to childcare, a crucial plan is to expand enrollment in high-quality childcare by maximizing federal funding, increasing state funding, and improving eligibility. You know more than anyone that childcare is key to not only Michigan's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, but to our state's entire future. And with historic federal funding on the table right now, we have an incredible opportunity to improve our systems. Your involvement in this work is critical. Policymakers in our state must hear directly from providers like you in order to make the right decisions for kids and families. So tonight, we ask that you take part in this discussion actively, that you feel free to ask questions and to share your input about what is needed to create a system that works for families, providers, and employees. So I'm joined tonight by two of my co-chairs in the Think Babies Michigan Collaborative, Matt Gillard from Michigan's Children and Denise Smith from Hope Starts Here. At this time, I'll turn things over to Matt, who will give us a breakdown of the federal funding available to Michigan. Matt?
This technology. Well, thank you, Gilda. I hope everybody can see me and hear me all right. I love this technology. I'm still learning. I am Matt Gillard. I'm the president and CEO of Michigan's Children. I want to thank Gilda for the introduction, thank Holly, everybody at ECIC, the governor's office, and mostly thank all of you for attending this evening, taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit about this and to make your voice heard. It's critically important, as Gilda stated. So I talk fast, I'll try to slow down, but please ask questions either in the chat or by raising your hand through the mechanisms that are allowed. I'm just gonna lay the framework kind of on why we're here, what's available, and kind of set the parameters around what it really is truly a historic opportunity, as Gilda alluded to, in front of us. And then hopefully, set the stage for the conversation that we can have about what we think should be done with this opportunity. So this is all coming as a result of the federal government's response to the COVID pandemic. And really, a big chunk of it is from the December bill that passed back in December, and now even more so has been, hugely supported by or supplemented by the passage of the American Rescue Plan here last month. And so if you look at what that means for Michigan and the American Rescue Plan alone, so this was the $1.9 trillion package that Congress passed with President Biden's support to get relief to families across the country and to states and local governments across the country. Included in that is about $39 billion, billion with a B, specifically for childcare. And that's divided up between two really separate pots of money. About 14.9, right around $15 billion went straight into the Child Care Development Block Grant. This is the primary funding stream that funds our subsidized child care program in Michigan and in every other state in the country. And then just about $24 billion of that went into the stabilization fund that was designed specifically to provide grants to providers to stabilize their businesses and their opportunities to emerge and to sustain themselves during this pandemic and to emerge on the other side. And so in addition to that, so what that means for Michigan is that's about almost $700 million in Michigan simply on the stabilization fund from the American Rescue Plan, the ARPA funds, and then about $450 million in increased CCDBG funds. So that's about a little over 1.1 billion just in the American Rescue Plan bill funds. And you can add to that, Michigan received $271 million in increased child care funding as a result of the December package that was passed by the federal government. So all told, we're looking at about $1.4 billion in increased funding specifically to child care for the state of Michigan. This is a tremendous opportunity, as has been stated, for us to really think about how that money can be distributed to the system, to providers, and to the system in order to allow us to really build the child care system that we all want to see in our state that serves families and children and makes this a viable profession that we all want it to be. The way the process will work out here is a little bit unknown, but it certainly will be a legislative and political process that will include the legislature working with the governor's office to come up with either supplemental spending bills or the distribution of these funds in the regular annual state budget process. Some of you will probably remember that when the governor proposed her budget proposal for fiscal year 22, which will actually start October 1 of this year, that the legislature is currently deliberating on right now, she did call for spending the $271 million that at that time had already been approved for Michigan in the December federal bill. She called on the legislature to do that in a series of supplementals by April 1st. Obviously, that deadline is come and gone, but that was money that she had recommended was for increasing things like the income eligibility for our subsidy program to 200%, to continue to fund the program based on enrollment versus attendance, and some other ideas that the governor had supported in her proposal for use of those funds, and called on the legislature to enact it in a supplemental. Now, obviously, since that time, we've seen this increase, the passage of the American Rescue Plan, which has greatly increased the amount of additional federal funds that are available for these purposes. And so now the legislature and the governor are, I'll try to be delicate in saying this, trying to figure out what the process will be for these funds to start to get out the door. And childcare is a significant portion of this, and obviously what we're talking about today, but there's obviously a lot of other federal funds that have flowed down through the state or are flowing down through the state that need to get out as well. So this discussion in the legislature is bigger than just childcare, but childcare is a critical component of it. And so what we're likely to see happen is a combination of smaller supplemental bills being passed through the legislature where portions of this funding will be allocated by the legislature, and then some of it being included in the fiscal year 22 budget that will be passed by the legislature as well. The federal government, when they did pass this, did set time frames on, or time limits on the availability of these funds and when they have to be obligated by and then actually spent by. And so the big, for the American Rescue Plan, which is the $1.1 billion that is the bigger chunk of that, the important dates to note is that on the Child Care Development Block Grant side, so this is about the $450 million in increased CCDBG funding that the state has. The state has until the end of September 2023 to obligate all of those funds and then to spend them by September 2024. On the stabilization funds, this is a $700 million in stabilization funds that just came down as a part of the rescue plan. The time frame is a little shorter. The state has, I believe, I'm looking here, I think September of 2022, the funds have to be obligated by and then spent by September of 2023. So those dates may seem like a long ways out, but as we know, those of us who work closely with the legislature and through these processes, that's not that long out, and it is going to be incumbent upon all of us to make sure that our legislators know that this needs to be a priority and that they need to get moving on this. I think in addition, the stabilization funds in particular have a requirement attached to them that by the December of this year, so December of 2021, you have to show at least a plan where 50% of those funds have been spent. Or will be spent with the plan that's in place. And so that's an even shorter timeline around some of those stabilization funds. So that's kind of the structure or the framework that we're dealing with. You know, I am involved in a lot of conversations with a lot of different groups around this issue and around other issues related to federal funds and related to the process. And I think it's no surprise to anybody who's paying attention right now that we have a very dysfunctional system operating in Michigan right now with the relationship between the legislature and the governor. And it's really concerning to a lot of us advocates on the lack of progress that's being made on these issues. And I think it's going to quickly start becoming a real competitive issue for the state of Michigan as a whole, as well as we start to see other states moving quicker to get these funds out the door and into their intended purposes. As the federal government intended when this money was passed, where we're still kind of at step one, stuck at step one here in Michigan. And so that's why we're hoping that your engagement in this, you're taking the effort to learn a little bit more about this and helping shape the conversation will lead to more input and voice from folks around the state to urge the decision makers to get moving. I don't know, Alicia, is this a time, is there do we pause? Is there questions for me or about anything that I highlighted before we move on?
Yeah, we've got one question in here that's specific to what you're talking about. For just a clarification, if you could expand a little bit, Melinda Brown is asking about whether there will actually be any money coming this year.
I mean, we all hope so, Melinda. I mean, the sooner the better. Like I said, I mean, the governor called in her budget proposal that she presented to the legislature back in early February. She included in that a calling for a series of supplemental spending bills to be passed by the legislature by April 1st that appropriated the money from the December federal bill that has already passed. It's already come to Michigan. And so, yes, I think there's a lot of hope within the advocacy community. I think I can speak for the administration that the governor's hope is that this money starts getting out the door and to the folks who need it sooner rather than later. And, you know, I mentioned that there's other issues beyond childcare that are in kind of this same big fight right now. And I mean, one good example about the timeliness issue is after school, right? I mean, there's significant funding available for after school and summer school programs that need to flow through the state as well. Well, you know, we're quickly approaching summer, and if those monies are going to get allocated and out the door in a way that makes sense, they need to get moving on that. And so, yes, I think the hope from everybody that's involved in this process is that some of these funds will certainly get out the door this year, and the sooner the better.
So another question, Matt, coming from Susan Allen is, if the funds aren't obligated or spent by the due dates, will they be returned to the federal government?
Yes, I mean, that's what the language of the bill that's passed now, how that reads, that the state has to obligate the funds by those dates and then actually get the funds out the door by the dates that are indicated in those bills. If, you know, there is a whole lot of states that have not been able to do that for whatever reason, or there's other things, those bills could be amended, but that's a risky proposition to take. I think the assumption right now is that these are deadlines that Congress has placed on the expenditure of these funds, and that should absolutely, and these aren't, and it's not unreasonable. I mean, this is, and I mean, we have a full-time legislature. I mean, there's a lot of states that have part-time legislatures with very limited schedules where, you know, getting the appropriations of these things can be a real challenge at times. That should not be a challenge here in Michigan. You know, this should be one of the few times where having a full-time legislature should actually be a benefit. So, yes, I mean, that's the way the legislation reads now, that if these funds are not obligated or spent by the date that's set in the legislation, that money will then be returned to the federal government.
And then the last thing, we've got several questions around what can we be doing. We'll be ending with a call to action at the end of all of this, but Matt, do you want to speak just very briefly about what people can do?
Yes, I mean, that's really the intent of this call, is to give you the information you need to raise your voice and let your elected officials know what you think should be done with these funds. And that there should be some urgency, if you believe so, that there should be some urgency and prioritization around getting this funding out the door sooner rather than later in a way that's going to impact in a positive way the child care system. And so that's what we need. We need our elected officials hearing that from providers, from families, from anybody who cares about this stuff in order to get the ball rolling here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. And maybe we'll come back to you if other questions arise on that. But really, we want to spend the majority of our time hearing from all of you. The reason that Michelle and Lisa and legislators and advocates are on this call is not only to support you in sharing your voice with your legislators and being the advocates that you are, is really to understand what is happening and how these funds can best be utilized to support you in the really important work that you're doing as we pivot. And so we really want to understand from you, as both Gilda and Matt said, this is a historic amount of money and it's a one-time opportunity. And so we want to kind of start with talking about and learning from you what is happening right now, today, that are the most pressing needs and ideas you have for the funding. And then think about, after we talk about immediate issues, start thinking a little bit more long-term, because as Matt said, you know, there is funding that will continue for a while, but then stop. So I want to really start by inviting all of you, and again, I invite you to use the questions box to start out because we have so many people on here. My first question I want to pose is really, as childcare providers or childcare business owners, what are the biggest challenges you are facing today? If you can just type those things in the questions box. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to be typing those themes in. And my colleague Jennifer, as they start rolling, will read some of these off. And then I'm going to ask you about funding. And please note, I will then open it up for a few of you to talk. So let's just start by adding some comments into the questions about what's going on today. What are your biggest challenges?
So Holly, we're seeing lots of comments about finding qualified staff, staffing issues, retaining staff, hiring staff, low enrollment, keeping slots open for children that aren't coming back to care, understaffed and low numbers, low enrollment, just trying to keep their businesses open, trying to find qualified substitute staff. Yes, continuous theme of staffing issues, low enrollment, the pay for maintaining highly qualified staff as well, concerns about continued exposure to COVID, CPR training, transportation preventing families from coming. So those are the main themes coming in right now.
Okay. Great, thank you. So staffing, I'm hearing themes, staffing, low enrollment, pay to keep staff. So really about the infrastructure of keeping your businesses open by having the staff, but then balancing that with keeping your businesses open because of the low enrollment and concerns about continued exposure to COVID, which are all really important to pay attention to. So let's talk about resources. What ideas do you have about how these funds could most effectively support you right now with these issues on staffing and the enrollment and keeping your businesses going? Please share what you're thinking. And if any of you would like to speak, please feel free to raise your hand and I will call on a few of you to verbalize kind of what you're thinking about this to give us more context around what is happening today and how we might be able to advise the governor and the legislature on how to be supportive. So let's start with it. As things come in, Jennifer, if you want to share kind of what people are saying, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Just recognizing that childcare providers have been the backbone through the COVID and just exposure to COVID pay, hazard pay, more grants, more funding for grants to support them to keep their businesses open. Hazard pay keeps coming up for them. Continuation of the childcare relief grant. Yes, just help with trying to keep their rent, keep their businesses open, recognizing when they have staff that have been exposed to COVID, hazard pay, temporary closures for when they have to close.
Okay.
And access to subsidy is coming up, challenging to access, difficult for them.
Okay.
Yep, I'm seeing a lot of things regarding hazard pay and just funds to help them stay afloat.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's hear from a few of you who might want to talk about this. So I'm seeing Charlene Stefanowski. I'm going to unmute you And then Charlene, you just need to unmute yourself as well. So Charlene, if you just click on unmute for yourself, it should work. All right, I'm gonna go to someone else because maybe we lost Charlene there for a minute. We can come back to you, Charlene, if you can. Got several other hands up here, so let me, how about Angela Hayes? I'm gonna unmute you. So Angela, if you just unmute yourself, I've unmuted you. Angela Hayes? So there we go. Oh, try again, Angela. I saw you unmute for a second. So I do have everyone muted, but once I call on you, I am unmuting you, but it looks like a lot of you have muted yourself as well. So you just need to unmute yourself as well.
Hello.
There we go. Yay.
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 I had two questions. One was about hazard pay. I don't know if this is true or not, so maybe you guys could clarify it. That early Head Start providers were eligible for hazard pay, but Child Care Partners wasn't, like partnerships. So like the early Head Start.
Mm. So in our panel, do we have anyone who knows whether or not the early, are you asking about the early Head Start Child Care Partnership?
Yes. Are we eligible for that hazard pay like the Head Start agencies receive, their workers received hazard pay?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Angela, this is Michelle. So we have run hazard pay programs through the state, primarily focused for our K-12 educators. I want to flag that these programs were largely set up and passed by the legislature. And so there are some gaps certainly in the program that the governor has proposed addressing, and some inconsistencies exactly like you're talking about. Unfortunately, child care professionals have not yet been included in a hazard pay program at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Angela.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's. Sorry, there are a lot of you here. I'm scrolling through and finding some hands raised. How about our guest from Creative Child Place? I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Welcome.
Hi. I have gone through the star rating several times. I've had a 5-star in my home location. I've also had a 4-star in my center. I've had several staff go through the TEACH program, completing their bachelor's degree in early childhood. The problem that I'm seeing is that once they finish their bachelor's degree, we are stuck in a position where we may not be able to afford to have them on our staff anymore. And the purpose of the star rating is to increase quality. So I guess what I'm saying in the scheme of things is that in order to raise our profession, we have to have the star rating mean something. It has to hold a value. And other states have had opportunities to include the wages program, which is kind of an offset of TEACH if anyone has done the research on it. This would be a program that would pay it would give employees that have completed the TEACH scholarship or have a bachelor's degree in early childhood an opportunity to make up the wages that they would typically have if they, let's say, worked for a public school system. What I have researched is that if I could only pay my employee $14 an hour, this would offset it so that I would make it the national average for a bachelor's degree educator in early childhood. So this would then allow us private programs and home-based programs to keep quality staff that work so hard while working with children to get an equitable wage. Another part of that is that I was hoping that maybe in this state we could look at the opportunity for single women. We already know that we're serving a minority workforce that is a majority of minority women who potentially could be, receiving DHS services for themselves, for their own children to attend the programs that they work in. What could we look at the potential of having a health and retirement program that was set up as a group so that we could all have a fair buy-in? I've looked at different health insurance programs, and for an individual company, it's ridiculous the amount of money. And in order for us to do that, we're going to have to, raise our rates for families. And we're already looking at at least 12 to 14% increase in this upcoming fall. There was a blurb that kind of came out in the plan with Biden that we were going to see a raise in minimum wage up to $15 an hour, which is just completely undoable for early childhood to to start people off at $15 an hour when there are people with a bachelor's degree could potentially be making $15 an hour. Anyway, I'm just trying to be heard on this, and hopefully we can see some way that we can use the funding to treat early childhood professionals as professionals. They commit so much time to children and families, and we know the value from birth to 3. We know, we've done research on it. We know that quality programming is important for brain development. We have to support the workers that work in this field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, how about, 1 second here. How about Julie Woggeman? I'm gonna unmute you.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, hi Julie, welcome.
Hi. My main concern was for the what's considered the relative care. We got funding way back at the very beginning, but we haven't been eligible for any more of the other funding. And I was just trying to see if the relative care providers are eligible for anything. And is that something that's going to be in the future for us?
So Julie, you're talking about license exempt care, and what kind of funding are you thinking about, like an increase or being able to be eligible for the grants?
I'm thinking mostly for the grants, because right now relative care is out of my home, but I would need to do improvements to my home to be eligible for what they call home care, which I could bring in unrelated children. Right now I can only do related children, so which are my grandkids. So one of my grandkids was out because she tested positive, and that, of course, I don't do just one grandchild, so that took 6 of my kids out because they all had to quarantine together. So we're not allowed to do, well, I personally am not allowed to do unrelated children. So I was just trying to see if there was funding that could help me do the improvements on my home that I needed so I could go up a level
Mhm.
to stay, competitive. We received a grant, I think last year, almost a year ago, but then we fell behind. We weren't eligible for any more of them because we were relative care.
Mhm.
So I didn't know if there's actually separate funding for relative care.
Great. Thank you, Julie.
You bet.
We are adding it on to the wish list of ensuring that licensed exempt childcare providers would be able to be eligible as well. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank
Oh,
you.
you bet. You bet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, how about Katrina Stewart?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
My question is along the same lines as the other ladies that were on the call. And that is a great need to maintain, to retain the staff that we have and to be competitive in this industry to get others that are qualified to work within our childcare programs. Being a star rated center, it would, if there was a way that that initiative could be a little more enticing for our staff to get more quality staff, and also to maintain not only competitive salaries, but benefits as well. And I know benefits is actually a business expense, yet at the same time, where we're having to either close down classrooms, close down our center, or send staff home because of testing, waiting until they are positive or negatively tested for COVID. This cuts into all of our funding that we currently have. And, not many of us are fortunate to have resources outside of our private paid parents that come. We don't have the other resources as far as state funding to continue to maintain the income that is needed. I too, my center is also a star rated center, and we participate in the TEACH program. Many of my teachers have gone through or are going through the TEACH program. Unfortunately, once they've achieved their degree, after the time that is agreed upon for the contract, they may leave for a higher paying wage at another center. And that could be even if it's just 50 cents to $1 more. So for us to be able to maintain and to retain the quality staff that we need so we can provide the care for our families. Currently, I cannot enroll any more families, any more children until I get more staff. I am in the classroom daily, making sure that we maintain ratio, because if we can't maintain ratio, we can't keep our children safe. So as a director, I am not only running the center, but I am also in the classroom, maintaining ratio and still trying to keep the momentum of my staff and keep our families engaged. So if there was some sort of way that the star rating could be more of an incentive to pay our staff more, and then also there's funding that is available to pay them more so that they don't leave and go to other centers or in another sector of the industry, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Katrina.
Thank you.
Okay, how about Kimberly Ann Temple?
Am I unmuted?
You are. I hear you. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I do not do daycare, but I have been on disability. I've had 10 surgeries in the past 3 years. I'm 40 years old, and I come from across state in Muskegon, and I currently live in a rural region. So I come from a city that partnered with the autism program back in 2014 when it was launched. And I know there's a lot of different players that go into this, so I'm going to try to explain it the best that I can and to the best of my ability. Back in 2014, when the autism program launched, a lot of the teachers that were in classrooms that were doing like the before and after school programs. And for across state in Muskegon, it was the White Lake Area Education that supports the 4 schools. That funding for those teachers and those daycare providers was cut. And so when it came to bachelor employees that were being hired, the autism program, when it launched, when the employee
Kimberly, we can't hear you. I'm wondering if you moved and Kimberly. Okay, Kimberly, if you can hear us, I'm seeing that you're muted. We'll come back to you if you want to re-raise your hand. I think that we lost your connection, but of course we want to hear about the situation. I think you're talking about children with autism in particular, or children with disabilities and support for childcare for them. Well, let's try again. I see your hand up. There we go.
I'm sorry, I
There
must have
you
lost
are.
connection.
Good,
I was on a roll and I must have lost connection
you
with you.
were. Yes, sorry. Glad we got you back.
No, that's funny.
So a lot of our teachers in the school system were then, in order to get their benefits and in order for them to maintain their hours, they were in the before and after school programs for our children. And that funding was cut from teachers and the before and after school programs. So when they went to nonprofit and had before and after school programs, the people that were running it through the education program were no longer able to provide benefits to their employees. And so whether it's nonprofit, whether it's in-home or anything, a lot of those funding opportunities have been cut. Now, living in the rural region, we have not restarted the before and after school programs. There is no before and after school programs where I currently live in the rural region. This brings a huge concern because as many hospitalizations I've had, my daughter now 14, I have younger nieces and I've had to move my mom across state. And so I am watching hospital staff try to put together, single moms trying to put together to see who can watch their kid at night, because there is no overnight kid daycare program in the rural region. And so I have a huge concern in general of our children raising themselves when I come from community programs. And that's all I wanted to really say about all of it.
Okay. I'm so sorry to hear all that, Kimberly. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's an important issue to be raising. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so any other ideas, especially about this very short term? Like, are there things immediately that you need in order to be able to continue to serve children in your communities and navigate what is happening in the communities? And then we're going to talk a little bit more about longer term issues as well that we might be able to address. So I see Lynn Lippard. I'm going to unmute you. Let's see if you have any. Lynn, I've just unmuted you if you want to unmute yourself, if you're still there. There we
Hi,
go.
can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Lynn. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I'm really sorry. I joined about a half an hour too late. I just a couple quick questions. Is this for regular family and group daycares? And also, is there going to be like something like a recap or something that we can go back and kind of catch up on?
Absolutely. We'd be happy to we'll send out the recording of this as well, so you can hear
Oh,
the information
perfect. Thanks.
that we covered. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, sure. How about Megan Copes Fisher?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can. Hey, Megan.
Hey, so one of the things that our organization hears from our local providers that would be helpful is that they are designated to buy in bulk. Last I heard, that still hadn't changed, and that's something that is a huge issue for them when they are in their spare time, and to be able to buy those cleaning supplies, they are having to possibly go from place to place to place in their precious off time, or even when they're buying food, when we'd have limited supplies of like milk and eggs, again, they'd have to go to multiple places in order to be able to access that, to be able to change their status for centers, family home and group home. So that was something immediately as things continue on, making sure that our providers are covered in that way, if that hasn't already changed.
Great. Thanks, Megan. How about Meredith Kennedy? Are you there, Meredith?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
Hi. So I run a daycare, group daycare in Petoskey, and boy, I have so many things I could say. DHS wise is so difficult for our parents to achieve, that we all know that when it comes to childcare, you have to charge a certain amount to parents in order for us to be able to have employees. So therefore you have to, charge more or figure something out. I really don't think it's very fair that there's this, if you make one penny too much, God forbid, you and your husband now have to pay cash, or you as a single mother or a single father, or just anybody, a foster parent. I've had the most challenging issues for foster parents. I feel like that's something we greatly need to look at. As well as the fact that we have all these grants available, which I think is fantastic. I think Michigan is great for looking at our children, looking at our providers and saying, hey, guess what? We have these grants for you. Here's the problem. We get these taxable dollars and we get our taxes done, and we are lambasted with taxes upon taxes that now we have to pay. And if it's not paid, we lose our business. The other thing is, I had 4 things, and I'm sorry. The other thing was masks. The rules are so heavily enforced on masks, and I agree to protect our children and our loved ones. This is very important. But when we are to wear a full face shield, and let's say I have an employee that has anxiety or panic attacks, or an employee that has asthma, no doctor will write a note so that an employee can wear a face mask. Or a face shield, I meant. So therefore, I've lost employees there. This is all really great, and I agree that we should fight every day for the safety and for the ability for our community and Michiganders to be able to afford quality care through any way possible. But I really want us to remember that these providers, which I network with many in the area, won't even apply for grants because of the tax purposes and the work that is involved with these grants. If there's any way we can make them easier, if there's any way we can, high five the provider for actually applying for a grant instead of saying, oh, surprise, in the small print, now you owe $14,000 or more. So I have a lot of concerns. I think it's great. I love what you guys are doing. I just really feel there's so many things. I know I'm one person, but there's so many things that can be added to these grants, and that is maybe just like I said, looking out for the provider and not just the parents. That way we can stay open and not lose any more childcare facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to take one more before we start talking a little bit more long-term and see what else is in the questions box. How about DeAndrea Murray?
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so a couple of my concerns has to do with the DHS and the subsidy pay. With the children, you know, the parents are diligent in trying to keep the kids out once they come up with any symptoms in regards to COVID. And their diligence is ending up penalizing them because they're exhausting their absent hours. And by the absent hours taken until October to renew, at this point, there's a lot of parents that has exhausted absent hours trying to keep their kids out as they're picking up symptoms with the seasons changing, and causes for the parents to have to pay out of pocket. And of course, if they could pay out of pocket, they wouldn't be receiving assistance. And so that's a barrier that we're facing, because we end up losing those kids because the parents can no longer afford to, you know, miss days and pay for those days out of pocket. And then also the big issue is the pay gap between what subsidy pays for students that are ages 0 to 2.5, and then when they switch from 2.5 to preschool age, is it can be anywhere from a $50 difference in a week. And for certain parents, that's a lot of money. And so a lot of times we lose those families because, you know, we're offering them high quality programs, but most of them already end up with a copay out of pocket, and we could be star rated and everything else, but because of the less amount of funds that they'll receive through subsidy, it's making it hard for us to maintain those subsidy families. And then when we call the state, or when we try to get assistance or questions from the state, everything is always, this is our policy, refer back to your parents, that's for them to pay, that's for them to figure it out. And so there needs to be more absent hours allocated during this time while we're still in the pandemic. And there needs to be an increase in the pay and a closer bridging of the gap when children go from ages 0 to 2.5 to 2.5 and up. Because at the end of the day, they're still remaining in these same programs. And though we may have a difference in price in those age groups, some programs don't. And sometimes it's just too big of an expense that's added for those parents.
Thank you
So
very
that was
much.
my input.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great feedback and great ideas. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have the same questions really, but we really want you to be thinking about, I think that some of the things that we've been talking about really are both short and long term. But thinking now a little bit more about moving forward, let's say 6 to 18 months from now, same thing. What are some of these challenges that you're anticipating a year out from now that we might be able to be working up towards? So what might those challenges be that you're anticipating coming? Are there other challenges beyond the staffing and enrollment and really the keeping your business going? Hopefully things will start to get back to more of a normal cycle by then. So we welcome you to put in the questions anything that you're thinking about. Okay, if I can lift my head and think about beyond today, what's coming in the future that you're concerned about? And Jennifer, if people are putting stuff in, I would love to hear what people are saying.
Of course, lots of comments coming in, Holly, just scrolling through them. Again, just keeping their doors open, enrollment issues, families that might not return after COVID, staff, retaining high quality staff. Healthcare is coming up a few times, healthcare options for staff. Looking at the wage, again, accessing subsidy and looking at it not in an hourly rate. cost of supplies. Some feel that COVID is here to stay for a while, and so just accessing PPE, professional development training, having opportunities for free training.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Yep, those are the main things.
Okay. So are there, outside of the things that you have suggested already, what other ideas do you have about how this money could be spent to best be supporting you as childcare providers and business owners over the next year to 18 months, like kind of a longer term? It says some of the quick fixes. We did hear some of those, but we really want to harvest the great ideas that all of you have. So if you want to put some of those in the question box, and then I'm going to open it up for some more people to talk. I do want to make sure we're hearing from as many of you as we can. Jennifer, anything that we should hear before we open it up?
Yes, some are interested in facility expansion renovations, long-term, access to mental health consultants.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at them as they're coming in, we have a lot coming in. Struggles in rural settings to keep their doors open, outdoor playgrounds for children.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, looking at retaining high quality staff in the wage issue. Upkeep and taxes are a huge issue for many.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's hear from a few more of you. I'm seeing Heidi Lokinen. I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. I'm going to unmute you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, you actually said it right. I'm very impressed.
Oh, great. Oh, I'm so glad. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me tonight. I run a group daycare home on the west side of the state. And like some of the other concerns, I have the concern that I know it's come up many times in other conversations, but we're seeing a lack of care in the very young ages. So like the infant care and young toddler ages, so 2.5 and under. And I know that this is a problem for homes and centers as well. So where we're very limited as far as like how many infants and how many children we can have in those ratios. Going forward long term, how can we as providers accommodate the needs of those families? I don't have the answer for that, and I don't think very many people do. But when we're limited with those ratios and not being able to take on extra kids, and we're seeing a lot of, especially home providers closing, and now a lot of centers struggling to keep their doors open, how do we, as providers, accommodate those families and all of these, as we call it in our industry, COVID babies coming up, and sustain, the care and the quality for those families that are going to need the care in the long-term future. So that is something that I know a lot of providers in my area are concerned with, and what can we do going forward to help out in that situation? So, as far as expanding, or even if, we can hire on more staff, we don't have the ability to pay those staff going forward to accommodate those extra younger ages. So that was something that I just kind of wanted to throw out there as far as something that needs to be thought of for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Heidi. Really
Sure.
important to be thinking about infant toddler care. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
How about Janine Beck? Janine, are you there? I saw you were unmuted for a second.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'm from Macomb County, and I'm a director of preschool, childcare, GSRP, before and after care. And I'm very blessed to be a part of a school district which has helped supplement the money that our programs have not been able to receive this year. We were super grateful for the additional grants that helped families, obviously, for the different rounds, and also for our center as well for a few of them. And so I know that we're all here for the same reason, and we, obviously we want quality childcare, we want quality staff, we want competitive rates of pay, hourly amounts. And I guess just something that I continue to keep thinking about is this money that is gonna eventually come and be awarded out to us. Eventually over time that's going to be gone, and I'm not. And my point of saying that is, if we use it for increase, I'm just not quite sure. Like, if it's all going to eventually in a couple years be gone, will our programs come crashing down on us in the sense of, we can't, stay up to that, to what we're hopefully trying to use it for. We've got childcare rates are so expensive, and I think about the Teach Scholarship, and I've had several of my staff over the years use that, and that's been a blessing. And of course, they, after 6 months to a year, have gone somewhere else, of course, from the same situations that people had spoken earlier. They got more money, and even at 50 cents or $1 an hour or more, that means a lot in early childhood. I've been in the field almost 30 years, and I've seen so much occur. I mean, people will leave for 50 cents. And so it's almost like cutthroat in some, form. And so, and even though I'm in a public school, we're not anymore, our hourly amounts aren't any more giving than, a privately owned center, which I've run, or privately owned school, parochial schools, or even private centers in their homes. So I just think that, our biggest need is, number one, we need to be heard as professionals. Our staff need to be, centers need to maybe have additional funds so we can give these staff more education so they can be certified, right? We're not looked at as glorified babysitters. And then maybe, with DHS, if that can be improved as far as the hourly amount. I agreed. I think it was Kimberly that spoke and said, that gap between the toddlers and the 2.5, that's a huge gap. And I've lost families over the years due to that, because that copay was so much higher. And that needs to be looked at. But I also feel, though the state of Michigan has done a wonderful job in catching up with professional development, and I get the fact that entertainment is more money, and you can go to McDonald's and different places and make $15 an hour. But if that happens here in Michigan, there'll be so many more centers that will close their doors because we cannot afford it. So I'm not sure what else to look at. I don't know if it's taxing, tax cuts, or insurance is too high. But I mean, all these things continue to increase. And if we keep getting, which we're grateful, we'll take whatever support we can get. But I feel like there just needs to be some heavy conversation as to what can really be done long term to help us right now, and then just keep continuing. I don't know anymore, and I guess I should probably find this out, is how many childcare facilities and how many in-home facilities there are in the state of Michigan that are licensed. To kind of just have some more information for me. But I mean, I've been in this battle for almost 30 years in September, and I'll continue. It's just very hard. We've been frontline essential workers since last year. We haven't received any hazard pay. Schools can go virtual, but childcare is remaining open. And that hurts as a provider because I'm not understanding the reasoning for that. But then we haven't got any additional funds. GSRP, K through 12, they all got extra money, and we have not seen anything. So, you know, it's though we're super excited and this is a historical event for us. I mean, we've never received this kind of money before. So I hope that we can be very realistic in what we can use the money for. So down the road, it doesn't come back and go, man, you know, we don't have these funds now, and now it's going to kind of crash, you know, kind of like fall back, and or we can't support what it is going forward. So I'm not really sure if I'm saying that right, but I know that you know, there's dedicated professionals that are on this call. And I know the bottom line is health and safety of kids, families, and to retain our staff. You know, I'm you know, I oversee about 50 employees, and I literally have been working over 12 hours a day for almost the entire school year, and I'm in classrooms just like all my staff. And so, you know, I just feel like I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak and be on the call with a bunch of professionals that truly love early childhood as much as I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janine. And I'm seeing that a lot of your colleagues on here are agreeing with you wholeheartedly. And thank you all for working so hard and all the hours you're putting in and the commitment you're making to children and families. It really is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's hear from just a couple more. Of course, we want to hear from you. How about Shelley Garnsey?
Did I figure it out okay?
You did. Hello.
Hi. I am a provider, a family provider way up north in Marquette, Michigan in the UP. And I have spoke to both Lisa and Michelle and emailed with quite a few representatives about the past funding, the grants. And I'm bringing it up again because of possibility of future funding. I don't believe that the federal funding should have anything to do with Great Start star rating programs. Great Start is a voluntary program. You don't have to participate to be licensed in the state of Michigan. And I am one of those providers that did not receive any funding out of the last grant. I believe because so much extra monies out of the grants were given to star rated providers. And I really don't think that that should happen again. They were federal funds to be given to all licensed providers. And there was nothing in there about giving extra monies if you participated in a voluntary program. And my last research showed that I think only 50% less than Michigan providers do participate for very good reasons. I would like to agree about taxes on the grants for those that did receive them, because that was a huge hit. They did a forgiveness for unemployment. So a lot of people that were receiving a lot of money for unemployment got that really nice big forgiveness on what, up to 10,000, I think it was. Yet the grants given to daycare providers, while they were a huge blessing and they did still get to keep a goodly amount of it, they also got taxed substantially. And if any of them were like me, I have no dependents, and so I pay a lot in self-employment tax. I want to also agree on, I jotted down 4. I want to agree on ratios, especially for before and after school kids. If we could possibly up those a little bit. Like I said, I'm family, I'm licensed for 6. But to be able to get an extra child or two on and off the school bus, you know, it's 45 minutes to an hour in the morning, same in the afternoon. That would be a huge help, especially up here in our rural communities. We also lost our before and after school programs. A couple of local providers stepped up and did run them from a couple of schools, but many of our schools still do not have before and after school, and that is a huge need up here in the UP. And my last one would be, you know, maybe cracking down a little bit on unlicensed providers. There's some good people out there that are helping people out, but there's also people that are taking care of a lot of kids unlicensed. It is illegal in the state of Michigan, and nothing's done. You can write up your complaints, turn them into the state over and over and over again, and people continue to take care of many children, sometimes not very safely, and nothing's done. So those are mine.
Great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Okay, let's take a couple more. I would let's see. How about Sheila Anderson?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Hello, Sheila.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. I would just like to know if faith-based programs will be considered in future funding. I know they were last year, and I would certainly like to see that continue.
Okay. Do any of our colleagues know the answer to this, or we may need to get back with you if we don't know for sure?
Certainly, that's fine.
Yeah. Looks like we will add that to our Q&A so that we can answer. Okay. I love the question. Thank you so much. We will definitely get that. We've got it, and we will get an answer to you. So thanks so much for the question.
Thank you.
And let's do one more. How about Stephanie Bowles?
Hi. I've just been, my dogs naturally just started barking right now. I was just puzzling over, you know, the long-term implications, like the person from Macomb, I think, you know, like I've been able to use some of the grant funding and PPP loans and such to try to give my people closer to a living wage. I joined the Melba and found some templates about statewide ranges for salaries, and you know, I'm trying to hire a higher quality of staff, and you know, they want things, you know, like they want to be able to buy a house, they have a master's degree, you know, they think they should have a house and they should have health insurance, and you know, the things that like people want in this life. And you know, it kind of breaks my heart that my teacher that's been with me through her early childhood program, she came as an intern, you know, she confided that, you know, she bought a used house trailer because she decided she wanted to work for our program, and you know, that's the way she could afford to work for us. And you know, like that's heartbreaking. Like, is that what you want for your employees? So I don't know the solution, but I do know, like in Oregon, they just passed an initiative where, you know, they're through a tax increase on the wealthy, kind of like Elizabeth Warren's plan. I do think it's going to take government support and government, you know, not interference, but you know, to get involved in this. But I almost wonder if, you know, if we kind of paved the way, if we showed what this was like using some of these funds, you know, and people saw the value, saw it could work, saw the benefit, if that would help pass the legislation instead of constantly being on the edge of passing it, not passing it, or a politician decides it's not, you know, it'll keep women out of the workforce, which is where they want them, or, you know, whatever might come down the pike. I wonder, or if some of the funds could be used to create, I don't know, like like an investment fund or something? I mean, that's a lot of money, so maybe it could grow if you invested some of it and then it could fund itself. I don't know. That's not my bailiwick, but even creating something like pilot programs. I know as like I started my own program. I was a teacher and a college professor, and I just got this strange wild hair that I wanted to start a childcare program. So, whew, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it would have really helped me to have like some kind of toolkit or a model to adopt, or, you know, like what's the difference between a co-op and a sliding scale and a private pay, and how can I get, you know, can I weave or braid some of this funding stream together? You know, like philosophically, I really don't believe in the GSRP approach of putting everybody that's at risk together. I used to teach special education in self-contained classrooms, and to me, that's exactly what happens when you have a GSRP room. So, you know, couldn't you pay providers to have a GSRP child at their private preschool program? You know, like that, they would probably do better if they had better role models, you know, other children who had good language skills, or, you know, whatever their deficits would be, if it was a more diverse group of children that they were in with. So I think there's lots of different approaches, but it's too scattershot. So maybe if there was using some of the money to figure out these models, that people that are out there that like myself that really don't know what to do or how to do it, you know, could look to some of these models, and there would be some chance that they would succeed, and then, you know, we would get more high quality programs, and they would, you know, do better for children. So I don't know, those are just some ideas, but it seems rather short-sighted, even though we all need the money, myself included, to not think of the future, like balance it. You know, like the majority of the money I really think should go for its intended purpose, to help people survive right in this moment. But, you know, 3 years from now, if I'm paying my people, you know, $16, $17 an hour, and then all of a sudden, you know, the bottom falls out of everything, what am I going to tell them? I'm going to go back to paying them $13 an hour? That's not going to fly. So.
Right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Appreciate it. Really important point. You know, that the sustainability of whatever happens is going to be really, really critical.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question.
Thank you. Okay, and I understand that Representative O'Malley would like to say something. Let me. Actually, Jennifer, do you see Representative O'Malley in this list? I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a.
I was looking for him as well. I don't see his name under here, but I'm still looking too.
I am actually going to let I'm going to move to our colleague. While we do that, I am going to have our colleague, Denise Smith from Hope Start Here, just talk for a moment and give us our call to action.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the comments here tonight, and really appreciate you sharing your perspectives and experiences. As Matt mentioned at the top of the call, this is very important that your voice is heard and that your voice is critical to our next steps. As providers and advocates, we're calling you to act now more than at any other time. With the influx of these federal dollars that we've discussed this evening, this is a unique opportunity to make a down payment on the childhood system that we need. Many of you have talked about what could this mean, will we have to revert? I think it's an opportunity for us to really have documentation on what is needed to ensure better outcomes for our children. So we ask you to please take the time to contact your legislatures and ask them to appropriate the federal dollars, that childcare dollars that are available now and coming. As example, you would call them and say, I'm an early childhood advocate or educator, and I'm asking you to pass the $370 million in funding for childcare. This funding is urgent to the needs that support young children, programs, and our families. And then tell your story. You're an expert on your own experiences. After all, who could tell your story better than you? To assist you in identifying your specific legislators, we're going to drop the links to your House and Senate so you can find the representatives for your particular zip code. And finally, with the uptick of new strains and associated COVID cases, I ask you as the chair of the Women and Families Co-Chair of Protect Michigan to make an informed decision to get vaccinated against COVID. You can learn more at michigan.gov/coronavirus, and if we could put that also in our chat box. Once again, I want to thank you for being with us this evening and sharing your experiences, and ask you to keep your voices in the mix. Let your stories be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. All right, and as we're closing, just a couple of things. I do want to assure you again, for those of you who weren't on when we got started, we will be making a summary report available about all of the comments that people were putting in, and make the recording available. And then also we'll be sharing those your important feedback and ideas and suggestions with policymakers and others who might not have been able to make it today. And we encourage you to stay connected through the work of the Think Babies Michigan, really working together on our advocacy and policy change work. And we invite you to join the coalition, and this is a link to it. And of course, we will send that out to all of you with follow-up with the Q&A and other things. And in closing, I'm going to invite Michelle Richard to say a couple of things quickly, just to close us out. And just thank you so much for joining us. Michelle, did you want to say a couple things?
Thank you, Holly. So I actually wanted to close us out on behalf of Representative Jack O'Malley, who's on the call. He texted me and said, can I please add to the conversation? We just weren't able to unmute him. And what he wanted to pass along is that he hears you, legislative partners, the governor, hear the stories that you're telling us, that you talked about tonight. And we have people here in Lansing who are working hard every day to act on behalf of the child care providers in this state. I'm really excited to work in a bipartisan way. Representative O'Malley is a Republican, I work for a Democrat, and we are really working to make sure that child care can be a bipartisan issue where we can work together to work for you and for families. So thank you so much for your time tonight. We are extremely, extremely grateful for all the work you do today and always.
Actually, I think we might have found Representative O'Malley. Let's see.
Thank you, ma'am.
There we go. We're hiding in Kelly, so welcome.
Oh, hi, this is Kelly Breen, not Jack O'Malley, if that's what you were looking for. But
I thought that's who it was. So sorry.
No, I wanted to just add, Michelle has been amazing to work with, and I believe that we have a work group that has been assembled at the request of the governor, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and we are moving quickly on some reforms to help. And I want to thank Representative O'Malley. I'm a Democrat, he's a Republican. That does not matter. He has brought so much knowledge and useful information, and I'm quite confident that we're going to be able to accomplish some things. And I wanted to thank each and every one of you providers for everything you have done, especially during this pandemic. I just walked in the door myself. My 7-year-old is giving me a big hug. I understand a lot of the issues that the parents and the providers are going for. And thank you guys so much for all of your input, for orchestrating this webinar. And I look forward to addressing your concerns. And if anybody wants to contact me directly about it, you can reach me at kellybreen@house.mi.gov. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. All right. And thank you, everyone. We hope that you have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us and for all of the advocacy, and especially for all the work you're doing for Michigan's young children and families. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.